Hey darlings, welcome back to the channel. It's Avio. You know, I sit here reading your stories of betrayal, gaslighting, and the sheer, unadulterated audacity of men. Usually, when a woman finds out she is being played, the instinct is to cry, scream, or fight the other woman. But today's story, oh honey, this is a masterclass in letting the trash take itself out. Our girl Serena gets a literal do. Over at Life, let's dive into the absolute best moments of this glorious, cold-blooded corporate execution. The screech of tires, the violent bone, rattling jolt. Then nothing but the suffocating smell of smoke and the terrifying realization that I was trapped. My legs were pinned beneath the crushed dashboard of the SUV, through the shattered window. My vision blurred, but I could clearly see him standing safely on the asphalt. Cole Vance, my husband. His tailored suit was perfectly intact. He didn't rush forward, he didn't reach out a hand to pull me from the wreckage. He just stood there, looking at me with eyes as cold as a winter ocean. "Cole, help me," I choked out, tasting ash. He took a step back. "This is what you owe her, Serena." His voice cut through the sound of the blaring car horn, utterly devoid of emotion. "If you hadn't forced this marriage, Vanessa wouldn't have swallowed those pills on our wedding day. She died because of you." Before I could scream, before I could tell him he was insane, a blinding, absolute white light swallowed the world. "Do you, Cole Vance, take Serena Sterling to be your lawfully wedded wife?" The voice was rich, echoing slightly over the gentle crash of the Atlantic waves. The smell of smoke vanished, instantly replaced by the crisp, salty breeze of the Hamptons and the overwhelming scent of imported white hydrangeas. I blinked. The blinding light faded into the bright afternoon sun. I was standing at an altar. Hundreds of guests, the absolute elite of the East Coast, the titans of Wall Street, the old money patriarchs, were seated before me in perfectly aligned rows. I looked down. My hand was resting in Cole's. He was smiling that practiced. Chimera, ready smile, holding a $5 million flawless diamond ring, just inches from my finger. I am alive. Me heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. I was back to the exact moment my nightmare began. In my previous life, I had slipped that ring on with tears of joy, believing I had finally won the heart of the brilliant tech CEO I had loved for 8 years. I didn't know that his tragically deceased assistant, Vanessa, had faked her suicide. I didn't know she had fled to Europe on my family's dime, waiting for Cole to inherit the Sterling Empire so they could live happily ever after. I didn't know my reward for loving him would be a locked car door and a cold-blooded murder. "I do," Cole said, his voice smooth, his eyes meeting mine with a perfectly rehearsed look of devotion. He moved to slide the heavy diamond onto my knuckle. "Stop." My voice wasn't loud, but in the hushed reverence of the ceremony, it cracked like a whip. Cole's hand froze mid-air. His smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. "Serena, darling." "What is it?" he whispered, his grip tightening warningly on my fingers. I didn't answer him. Instead, I yanked my hand out of his grasp. The sudden movement sent a ripple of gasps through the front rows. My father, sitting in the front pew, frowned in confusion. I reached over, snatched the $5 million ring right out of Cole's hand, and turned my back on him. I walked down the 3 velvet, covered steps of the altar, heading straight for the bridal party, me eyes locked onto the woman, standing at the very end of the line. Vanessa Adams. She was dressed in a demure bridesmaid gown, looking like the picture of innocent fragility, the poor, hard-working assistant I had personally sponsored. The girl whose mother's luxury rehab bills and brother's Ivy League tuition were secretly paid by my anonymous trust fund. As I approached her, the color completely drained from Vanessa's face. Her eyes darted frantically toward Cole at the altar. I am obsessed with this energy. Most women would throw a drink. Serena threw a $5 million anchor. Handing the mistress the ring in front of the entire East Coast elite is top-tier psychological warfare. It's not just you can have him. It's a congratulations on winning the grand prize of a bankrupt narcissist. She didn't fight for a man who didn't want her. She literally outsourced him. I grabbed her left hand. She was trembling so violently, I could feel the vibration in her bones. Without a word, I shoved the massive diamond ring onto her ring finger. "There," I said, my voice carrying over the dead, silent lawn. "It fits you perfectly. I'm giving him to you, Vanessa May. You both rot together." Total, deafening silence fell over the Hamptons estate. Then Cole was there. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin, dragging me a step back. The mask of the perfect groom was entirely gone, replaced by a dark, furious scowl. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed through clenched teeth, keeping his voice low enough to avoid the microphones. But his eyes were manic. "Are you trying to humiliate both our families? Put the ring back on and finish the ceremony." Whispers erupted among the guests like wildfire. Did she just give her ring to the assistant? Is the sterling heiress having a breakdown? Cole Vance is known for being a workaholic. There's no way he'd touch his staff. Hearing the whispers, Vanessa immediately snapped into her victim routine. Tears welled up in her large doe-like eyes. She took a step forward, her voice trembling with manufactured terror. "Miss Sterling, I don't understand," Vanessa whimpered, looking around at the billionaires watching her. "Did I do something wrong? Please, I'll leave right now if I offended you." "I would never." "Save the performance, Vanessa," I interrupted, my voice dripping with absolute disgust. I looked at Cole. "You really think you hid it well, didn't you? You thought I was just your foolish, desperate ticket to saving your bankrupt tech company." Cole's jaw tightened. "You are having a psychotic break, Serena. I am calling a doctor. Call whoever you want. But first, let's entertain our guests." I raised my hand and snapped my fingers toward the AV booth at the back of the lawn. The string quartet had stopped playing. The massive LED screens flanking the altar, which were supposed to play a romantic montage of our childhoods, suddenly flickered. The image of our engagement photos vanished. Instead, high-definition security footage filled the screens. It was the lavish, unmistakable hallway of the Waldorf Astoria. The crowd went dead, silent. On the screen, a man and a woman stumbled out of the elevator. They were kissing desperately, violently. The man had him pinned against the wall, his hands roaming all over her. He tore off his silk tie, throwing it to the floor. The woman wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him toward a suite. They stumbled inside, and the heavy mahogany door slammed shut. The faces on the screen were undeniable. It was Cole Vance and Vanessa Adams. Pandemonium broke out. Me father stood up, his face purple with rage. The Vance family looked like they had been struck by lightning. The whispers turned into an uproar of scandalized shouts. "Turn it off!" Cole roared, his composure shattering completely. He pointed wildly at the AV booth. "Turn that off right now. Serena, you spied on me." Vanessa let out a pathetic shriek. The panic finally broke her facade. She tried to run, to escape the hundreds of judging eyes, but her heel caught on the edge of the carpet. She collapsed onto the marble aisle. As she hit the ground, hair designer clutch, A limited edition piece she could never afford on an assistant's salary burst open. Lipstick, keys, and a folded piece of medical paper spilled out across the pristine white marble. Cole rushed forward, not to help her up, but to shield her from the cameras that the guests were now pulling out. But I was faster. I stepped forward and picked up the folded paper. I didn't need to read the fine print. I already knew what it was from my past life. I turned to face the crowd, holding the document high in the air. "Stop the act, Cole," I said, my voice echoing through the microphones for the entire estate to hear. "She came to you this morning, didn't she? Begging you to call off the wedding and run away with her, but you wouldn't do it, because you need my family's money too much." I threw the paper directly at Cole's chest. It fluttered to the ground, landing right next to Vanessa's trembling hands. "A positive pregnancy test," I announced, looking dead into Cole's horrified eyes, dated 2 weeks ago. Cole stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. Vanessa was sobbing uncontrollably on the ground, forgetting to even pretend to be innocent. I looked at the man who had watched me die, feeling nothing but the thrill of the executioner. "The merger is dead," I declared, my voice cold and absolute. "The wedding is cancelled, and Cole, enjoy your new family, because by Monday morning, I am going to make sure your precious tech empire burns to the ground." The Hamptons estate, usually a bastion of quiet, restrained wealth, had erupted into a zoo. Chimera flashes blinded the lawn. The string quartet had fled. Me father Richard Sterling, a man who could crash a foreign currency with a single signature, stepped onto the altar. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. The sheer, freezing authority radiating from him silenced the immediate vicinity. "The Sterling family extends its apologies to our guests," my father said, his voice carrying the weight of a judge handing down a death sentence. He didn't even look at Cole. "There will be no wedding today. Furthermore, all joint ventures, credit lines, and corporate affiliations between Sterling Enterprises and Vance Technologies are terminated, effective immediately." Cole looked as if he had been physically struck. "Richard, wait, please." He lunged forward, his hands raised in desperate supplication. "It's a misunderstanding. It meant nothing. You can't pull the funding. The IPO is next month." My father signaled to his security detail. 2 massive men in dark suits instantly blocked Cole's path, shoving him back. "Do not ever speak to me or my daughter again," my father said coldly, turning his back on him. I watched Cole's chest heave. In my past life, I had thought his ruthless ambition was a sign of a strong leader. Now, watching him panic over his stock valuation, while his pregnant mistress wept on the floor, I only saw a pathetic, greedy coward. Suddenly, Cole's phone began to vibrate in his pocket. Then, the phones of the Vance family board members seated in the front rows started buzzing in unison, a chorus of digital alarms signaling financial slaughter. Cole pulled his phone out with trembling hands. I didn't need to see the screen to know what was happening. The news of the Sterling withdrawal had hit the private investor networks. His company was bleeding millions by the second. His life's work was vaporizing before his eyes. "Serena." Cole turned to me, his perfectly styled hair now disheveled, his eyes wide with a terrifying mix of rage and panic. "You planned this. You set me up to destroy me." "I simply showed everyone who you really are, Cole," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You destroyed yourself." Before Cole could take another step toward me, a hand grabbed the hem of my dress. I looked down. Vanessa had crawled across the marble aisle. Her makeup was smeared, and the facade of the innocent, bullied assistant had vanished, replaced by sheer, desperate survival instinct. She had seen Cole's empire crumble in 60 seconds. She knew that without his money, she was nothing. "Miss Sterling, please," Vanessa sobbed, clinging to my dress. "Punish me, hate me, but don't ruin Cole's company. You don't understand what it is like to struggle. You were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You don't know what it means to have a family relying on you, to have nothing." I stared down at her. The sheer audacity of her words almost made me laugh. To have nothing. I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. I knelt down, bringing my face level with hers. Vanessa flinched, expecting me to strike her. I didn't. Violence was beneath me. I had something far more devastating. "Let's talk about your struggles, Vanessa," I whispered, my voice laced with venom. "Let's talk about your mother, resting comfortably in the penthouse suite of the Silver Pines Rehabilitation Center. $2,000 a day." Vanessa's breath hitched. Her tear-filled eyes widened in shock. How? How do you know about that? And let's talk about your younger brother," I continued, ignoring her question. "A sophomore at Columbia University, full tuition, room and board, completely covered." "Cole told you?" Vanessa gasped, looking back at Cole, who looked just as confused as she did. "Cole," I let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Cole doesn't have the cash flow to afford his own private jet leases, let alone your family's charity cases. No, Vanessa, Cole didn't pay for it." I leaned in closer, watching the exact moment the horrific truth dawned in her eyes. "The anonymous benefactor from the ESS Trust, who has been funding your entire miserable family's survival for the last 3 years, is me." Vanessa's face turned the color of ash. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't just betrayed her boss. She had slit the throat of her family's only savior. "I felt sorry for you," I said, my voice turning to ice. "I thought you were a hard-working girl dealt a bad hand. I gave you the job. I saved your mother. I educated your brother. And in return, you slept with my fiancé in my hotel and plotted to take my place. Number, Serena, please. I didn't know." Vanessa began to hyperventilate, her hands trembling violently as she reached for me again. I stood up, stepping out of her reach. "My wealth manager was instructed to make a few calls while the video was playing," I announced, loud enough for Cole to hear as well. "Your mother is being evicted from Silver Pines as we speak. Your brother's tuition check has been cancelled. You wanted Cole. You have him, but you get him bankrupt, and you get him with nothing." Vanessa let out a gut, wrenching scream, collapsing onto the marble, clutching her stomach. Cole stared at me, his face pale and contorted with a mix of awe and absolute terror. He was looking at a stranger. The desperate, love-struck girl he thought he could manipulate was dead and gone. "Have a lovely life together," I said. I turned my back on the wreckage of their lives and walked away. I didn't look back as Cole began screaming at his lawyers over the phone, or as Vanessa sobbed into the grass. I walked straight into the main house of the estate, the heavy oak doors shutting behind me, instantly muting the chaos outside. The grand foyer was cool, dark, and blessedly quiet. I let out a long, shaky breath, letting the adrenaline slowly recede. I had done it. I had rewritten my fate. Now it was time to take over the Sterling Empire. I always knew my cousin was a fool. A deep, smooth voice echoed from the shadows of the grand staircase. "But I never expected you to gut him so beautifully." I froze. Stepping out of the dim light of the mahogany staircase was a man. He was tall, dressed in a sharp, dark, bespoke suit that made Cole's look cheap. His jawline was sharp, and his dark eyes gleamed with a dangerous, calculating amusement. Gabriel Vance, Cole's cousin, the black sheep of the Vance family, and the most ruthless venture capitalist on Wall Street. He slowly descended the stairs, his eyes locked onto mine, a predatory but deeply appreciative smile playing on his lips. "Hello, Serena," Gabriel said softly, stopping just a few feet away. "It seems you have an opening for a new partner, and I'm not talking about marriage." Gabriel Vance stood before me, the faint scent of cedarwood and expensive scotch clinging to him. Unlike Cole, whose ambition was always loud and desperate, Gabriel's power was a quiet, suffocating gravity. He was the man Wall Street whispered about, the one who tore apart legacy companies and rebuilt them just for sport. "A partner," I echoed, my voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. "I just publicly executed your cousin and severed ties with your family's entire portfolio. And you want to talk business?" Gabriel chuckled, a low dark sound that rumbled in his chest. "Serena, my family is a sinking ship piloted by idiots. Cole was just the loudest idiot. You didn't ruin him. You just handed him the shovel he used to dig his own grave." He took a step closer, his dark eyes tracing the defiance in my posture. "You're going to take over Sterling Enterprises now. Your father will demand it, but the board will see you as a scorned bride, a liability. You need someone who knows the wolves, someone who can help you restructure the tech acquisitions you just ripped away from Cole." He wasn't wrong. The Sterling board of directors was a den of vipers. They respected my father, but they had always viewed me as the pampered heiress whose only real job was to secure a strategic marriage. "And you're offering to be my attack dog?" I raised an eyebrow. "I prefer the term strategic ally," Gabriel murmured, his gaze dropping briefly to my lips before snapping back to my eyes. "Besides, I've always preferred your company to Cole's let me buy you dinner. We can discuss the hostile takeover of Vance Technologies over a good Bordeaux." I looked at him. In my past life, I had barely spoken to Gabriel. I was too busy learning Cole's favorite recipes and organizing his schedule. I had been blind to the apex predator standing right in front of me. "I am moving to the city tomorrow," I said, making my decision. "My penthouse in Tribeca, 8 o'clock. Don't be late." Gabriel's smile widened, sharp and full of promise. I wouldn't dream of it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of corporate warfare. I didn't return to the lavish townhouse I had shared with Cole. I sent a team of movers to pack my clothes and leave the rest. I moved into my private penthouse in Tribeca, threw myself into the Sterling boardroom, and began systematically dismantling every project Cole had ever touched. The media had a field day. The runaway bride, heiress became the most feared woman in Manhattan. Cole's stock plummeted by 40%. Without the Sterling capital, his creditors were circling like sharks. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered it without looking. "Serena Sterling." "Serena, it's me." Cole's voice. It sounded hollow, raspy, completely stripped of its usual arrogance. I paused, sipping my espresso, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. "How did you get this number?" "I had my security team block your entire family. I used a burner phone," Cole said, his voice tight with desperation. "Please, just listen to me. You've made your point. You've humiliated me. You've crippled the company. Are you satisfied? Can we stop this now?" I let out a dry laugh. "Stop what?" "Cole, I'm just doing business. You're the one who seems to be struggling to keep up." "I haven't eaten a proper meal in days," he blurted out, the pathetic entitlement bleeding through his desperation. "You used to bring me dinner at the office when things got stressful. I miss that. I miss you. Vanessa doesn't understand the pressure I am under. All she does is cry about her mother being moved to a state facility. A wave of pure, unadulterated disgust washed over me. He was bankrupt, his mistress was pregnant, and he was calling me because he missed his personal chef. Cole, you are truly a psychological marvel, I said coldly. You want me to bring you dinner? Go to the nearest soup kitchen. I hear they serve excellent humble pie. Serena, wait, he panicked. I can fix this. I'll pay Vanessa off. I'll make her get rid of the kid. I'll send her far away. We can start over. I promise. My wife will only be you. You are the only one fit to be a Sterling. Who are you talking to? The voice didn't come from the phone. It came from the open kitchen of my penthouse. Gabriel walked into the living room, casually rolling up the sleeves of his crisp white dress shirt. He was holding a silver tray with 2 perfectly seared filet mignons and a bottle of Chateau Margaux. He had been coming over almost every night, ostensibly to discuss our corporate raids, but increasingly he had taken over my kitchen. Just a wrong number, I said, looking at Gabriel. On the other end of the line, Cole stopped breathing. Serena, who was that? Is there a man in your apartment? At this hour? Gabriel set the tray down on the marble island. He walked over to me, his eyes gleaming with dark amusement. He didn't ask for permission. He simply reached out, took the phone from my hand, and put it on speaker. Hello, Cole, Gabriel said, his voice smooth and deadly. A sharp intake of breath hissed through the speaker. Gabriel, what the hell are you doing in Serena's penthouse? Cooking dinner, Gabriel replied easily. Something you apparently never learned how to do. She prefers her steak medium rare, by the way. Not that you ever bothered to ask. You son of a bitch, Cole roared, the sound of glass shattering echoing in the background. You're moving in on my fiancée. You've always been jealous of me, Gabriel. You're just trying to take what's mine. Gabriel's expression darkened. The playful amusement vanished, replaced by the freezing cruelty of a predator. She was never yours, Cole, Gabriel said softly. You were just too stupid to realize you were holding a diamond, so you threw it away for a cheap piece of glass. Do not call this number again. If you do, I won't just bankrupt your company. I'll make sure you can't even afford a burner phone. Gabriel hung up the phone and casually tossed it onto the sofa. He turned back to me, the darkness in his eyes fading as he looked at my stunned expression. He offered a small, almost boyish smile. Steak is getting cold, he said gently. Shall we eat, partner? I looked at the man standing in my kitchen, realizing for the first time that my revenge wasn't just about destroying my past. It was about making room for a future I never knew I wanted. The hostile takeover of Vance Technologies was brutal, efficient, and entirely legal. Within a month, Cole's board of directors, terrified of total financial ruin, voted to oust him as CEO. They sold the controlling shares to a shell corporation, secretly managed by Gabriel and me for pennies on the dollar. Cole was escorted out of the glass tower he had built, carrying nothing but a cardboard box. I watched the news footage from my office at Sterling Enterprises. Cole looked haggard, his designer suit hanging loosely on his frame. He shoved past the paparazzi, his face a mask of humiliated fury. My assistant knocked softly on the door. Miss Sterling, a package arrived for you, from your old residence. It was a small velvet box. I opened it, and a wave of memories hit me. Inside lay a tarnished vintage brass compass. The glass was cracked, and the metal was scarred by fire. In my past life, I had kept this hidden in my jewelry box, planning to give it to Cole on our first anniversary. I had planned to tell him the truth. That 15 years ago, during the horrific yacht explosion off the coast of Nantucket. I was the little girl who had dragged him out of the burning cabin. I was the one who had tied off his bleeding arm. I was the one who had stayed with him in the smoke until the Coast Guard arrived. When he was semi-conscious, blinded by the ash, he had pressed this compass into my hands and asked my name. I had whispered, Serena. But through the roar of the flames and his fading consciousness, he had misheard. He heard Vanessa. Years later, when the opportunistic Vanessa Adams discovered this piece of his past, she used it. She claimed she was the girl on the boat. She claimed the burn scar on her thigh was from saving him. Cole, blinded by his twisted savior complex, had given her a job, his bed, and eventually his loyalty. I looked at the charred compass now, feeling absolutely nothing but contempt. Have this couriered to Cole Vance's new address, I told my assistant, dropping the compass back into the box. Include a note, just one sentence. Check her thigh for the scar. Cole was living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. It was all he could afford after his assets were frozen. When the courier dropped off the velvet box, Cole tore it open, expecting legal documents, or perhaps a final settlement offer from the board. Instead, he saw the compass. His breath caught in his throat. He stared at the cracked glass, his mind spinning. Why did Serena have this? He had asked Vanessa about the compass years ago, and she had told him it was lost in the ocean during the rescue. He read the note, check her thigh for the scar. Cole's hands began to shake. He remembered the story Vanessa had told him, how a burning beam had fallen on her leg as she dragged him out of the yacht. He had always been so careful, so reverent of that scar. But suddenly, a sickening realization washed over him. The fire on the yacht had started in the engine room. The cabin where he was trapped was filled with thick, blinding smoke. But there were no actual flames in that room. The girl who saved him couldn't have been burned by a falling beam. The front door of the apartment clicked open. Vanessa walked in, carrying bags of cheap groceries. She looked exhausted, her pregnant belly now visibly rounding under a worn sweater. Cole, I got the off. Brand pasta, it was on sale. Take off your pants, Cole interrupted. His voice a low, dangerous growl. Vanessa froze, dropping a bag of oranges. They rolled across the cheap linoleum floor. What, Cole? What is wrong with you? Cole stood up, clutching the compass so tightly, his knuckles turned white. He closed the distance between them in 3 strides, his eyes wild. I said, show me the scar, Vanessa. He roared, grabbing her arm. The burn scar. The one you got when you saved me on the boat. Vanessa's face drained of all color. She looked at the compass in his hand, and pure panic flashed in her eyes. Oh, honey! The absolute gag Vanessa thought she was securing the bag, only to realize she just slit the throat of her actual sugar mama. Men like Cole love to play the wealthy savior using their fiancé's credit card. It's a brutal reminder. Ladies, the self, made man your side. Chick is bragging about is usually just heavily subsidized by a very tired, very rich wife. Girl math is realizing you've been funding your own betrayal. Cole, you are hurting me. I had laser surgery. You know I've been getting treatments to fade it. Liar, Cole shoved her back, his voice cracking with a horrifying mix of rage and realization. There was no fire in the cabin, only smoke. You were never on that boat. You read my old journals when you were my assistant. You stole her story. You stole Serena's story. Vanessa burst into tears, sinking to the floor. Cole, please. I did it because I loved you. I knew you wouldn't look at a poor assistant like me unless you thought I was special. But I love you. I am carrying your child." Cole looked down at the woman weeping at his feet. The woman he had destroyed his life, his empire, and his marriage for. She wasn't his savior. She was a parasite who had fed on his ego. And Serena. Serena was the one who had pulled him from the wreckage. Serena was the one who had loved him for 8 years. Serena was the one who had secretly kept his miserable mistress's family alive. And he had let her walk away. A guttural scream of pure agony ripped from Cole's throat. Her hurled the compass at the wall, shattering the vintage glass into 100 pieces. He stumbled backward, grabbing his coat, and bolted out the door, leaving Vanessa sobbing on the floor. He had to find Serena. He had to beg. He had to do whatever it took to get his real savior back. It was raining heavily when Cole arrived outside my Tribeca building. He bypassed security, waiting in the shadows near the private garage entrance. He was drenched, shivering, looking like a madman. When my black SUV pulled up, Cole darted out from the alley, throwing himself in front of the car. The brakes screeched. I sat in the back seat, looking up from my tablet, with a frown. Cole rushed to my window, slamming his palms against the wet glass. "Serena, Serena, please. I know the truth. I know it was you on the boat. Open the door." Before my driver could intervene, the door on the opposite side of the SUV opened. Gabriel stepped out into the rain. He didn't rush. He walked around the back of the SUV with the terrifying calm of an executioner. "Gabriel, stay out of this," Cole screamed, wiping rain and tears from his face. "This is between me and my fiancée. She saved my life. She loves me." Gabriel stopped right behind Cole. He reached out, grabbed Cole by the collar of his soaked coat, and spun him around. Without a single word, Gabriel's fist connected with Cole's jaw. The sound of bone cracking echoed over the rain. Cole was lifted off his feet, crashing hard onto the wet pavement. He spat out blood, groaning in agony as he tried to push himself up. Gabriel stood over him, adjusting his cuffs, the rain sliding off his tailored suit. "She was your savior, Cole," Gabriel said, his voice colder than the storm. "But she's my queen now. If you ever come within 100 feet of her again, I won't just break your jaw. It will break every bone in your body and throw you in the Hudson." Gabriel turned, opened my door, and offered me his hand. I looked down at Cole, bleeding and broken in the gutter. The man who had locked me in a burning car in my past life was now nothing but garbage in the rain. I took Gabriel's hand, stepped over the puddle, and walked into the building without looking back. The rain washed the blood from Cole's face as he stumbled back into the cramped Queen's apartment. But it couldn't wash away the venom festering in his mind. His jaw throbbed violently where Gabriel had struck him, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony of his shattered ego. He had lost everything, the sterling billions, his tech empire, his reputation. And the woman who had truly loved him, the woman who had actually saved his life all those years ago, was now standing beside his greatest rival. He pushed open the flimsy apartment door. The place smelled of cheap takeout and despair. "Cole, where have you been?" Vanessa marched out of the tiny bedroom, her face pale and puffy from crying. The sweet, submissive facade she used to wear at the office was completely gone. Now she was just a desperate, cornered animal. "The landlord was here," she shrieked, her voice grating against Cole's pounding headache. "We are 2 weeks late on rent. My mother called from the state facility. She hates it there. You promised me a life of luxury. Cole, you promised me we would be running the city. What are we going to do?" Cole stared at her. He didn't see the mother of his unborn child. He didn't see the poor, struggling girl he had sworn to protect. He saw a parasite, a liar who had stolen Serena's story, manipulated his savior complex, and dragged him down into this pathetic, squalid hell. If she hadn't lied, a dark voice whispered in his mind, I would be married to Serena right now. I would be a billionaire. Cole, are you even listening to me? Vanessa grabbed his wet coat, shaking him. You need to call your lawyers. You need to sue Serena, or we need to go to the press and tell them she is a monster. A sudden, terrifying calm washed over Cole. The manic desperation in his eyes faded into a dead, sociopathic emptiness. You are right, Vanessa, he said, his voice eerily soft. He reached up and gently stroked her cheek. She flinched, surprised by the sudden shift in his demeanor. I've been going about this all wrong. We can't stay here. What do you mean? Vanessa asked, her eyes darting nervously. I have a hidden offshore account, Cole lied smoothly, not blinking. And a cabin upstate, near the Palisades cliffs. The board doesn't know about it. We're going to lay low there, access the funds, and leave the country. Vanessa's eyes lit up with greedy relief. Really? You still have money? Yes, Cole smiled. It was a cold, lifeless stretch of his lips. Pack your bags, take my SUV. It's parked in the alley. Drive up to the cabin. I'll stay behind to shred some documents and take a bus up to meet you by midnight. Okay. I'll pack right now. Vanessa scurried into the bedroom, completely oblivious to the shadow of death looming over her. Cole walked into the kitchen. He didn't look for food. He opened the utility drawer and pulled out a pair of heavy wire cutters. He slipped down the back stairs to the dark rain-soaked alley where his heavy SUV was parked. He crawled under the chassis. The rain masked the sound of the metal snapping as he compromised the brake lines, not completely severed, but weakened enough that they would blow out the moment extreme pressure was applied. Then, he climbed into the driver's seat. He pulled the seatbelt all the way out and jammed the locking mechanism with a small piece of metal. Once clicked in, the belt would not release. He stepped back into the shadows, watching as Vanessa hurried out of the building with 2 heavy suitcases. She loaded them into the trunk, climbed into the driver's seat, and buckled up. Cole watched the taillights fade into the rainy night. Goodbye, Vanessa, he thought, feeling a twisted sense of liberation. Once you are gone, I can finally beg Serena for forgiveness without any baggage. The utter lack of originality. Men will literally commit premeditated vehicular manslaughter twice, rather than just go to therapy and get a real job. The fact that he used the exact same method to take out the mistress that he used on Serena in her past life proves that the viper always bites itself. He didn't love either of them. He only loved his own reflection and his bank account. Miles away, in the pristine climate, controlled environment of my Tribeca penthouse, I was sitting on the velvet sofa, sipping a cup of Earl Grey tea. Me tablet rested on the marble coffee table. On the screen was a live GPS map, a red dot blinking steadily as it moved north out of the city. Next to the map was a live text feed from the private investigator I had hired to monitor Cole. Since the wedding, Target 1, Cole tampered with the undercarriage of the SUV at 2114 Target. 2 Vanessa entered the vehicle and is currently driving north on the Palisades Interstate Parkway. Target 1 remains at the apartment. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold, but a chilling smile slowly curved my lips. Fascinating, I whispered. Gabriel walked into the living room, holding 2 crystal glasses of bourbon. He handed me one and glanced down at the tablet. His sharp eyes immediately processed the information. He sabotaged her car, Gabriel said, his voice devoid of shock, only a dark, clinical observation. He is trying to kill her. In my past life, I died in an SUV that caught fire, I said softly, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. I didn't look at Gabriel. Me eyes locked on the blinking red dot. I was trapped. The seatbelt wouldn't release. Cole stood outside and watched me burn, telling me it was my fault. I always wondered if it was a mechanical failure or if he had planned it. Gabriel went perfectly still. He didn't ask me what I meant by past life. He simply sat down beside me, his presence a heavy, comforting anchor in the room. Now you have your answer, Gabriel said quietly. He is a monster. He always was. He thinks getting rid of her will make me take him back. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. The sheer arrogance of it was almost poetic. Cole was using the exact same murder method on his true lovet he had used on me. The viper was eating its own tail. Are you going to warn her? Gabriel asked, watching my profile intently. I looked at the map. Vanessa was approaching the most treacherous, winding section of the cliffside highway. The rain was pouring heavily. Warn the woman who had stolen my charity, slept with my fiancé and mocked my death in another lifetime. No, I said coldly. I picked up my phone, but I didn't dial Vanessa. I dialed 911. Yes, operator, I said, my voice shifting into a tone of perfect, panicked civic duty. I'd like to report a suspected tampered vehicle on the Palisades Parkway. A black SUV, license plate JV, -8, -8, -2. I overheard a man named Cole Vance bragging about cutting the brake lines. His pregnant girlfriend is driving it right now. You need to send state troopers immediately. I hung up the phone and set it face down on the table. I wasn't going to save Vanessa, but I was absolutely going to make sure the police arrived just in time to find the wreckage, trace the sabotage, and lock Cole Vance in a concrete cage for the rest of his miserable life. On the dark, slick asphalt of the Palisades Parkway, Vanessa squinted through the windshield. The wipers were fighting a losing battle against the torrential rain. The road began a steep, winding descent. The guardrail on her right was the only thing separating the highway from a sheer 200-foot drop into the black waters of the Hudson River. A sharp curve approached. Vanessa moved her foot from the gas to the brake pedal and pressed down. The pedal sank all the way to the floorboard with a sickening hiss. Nothing happened. The heavy SUV didn't slow down. No, no, Vanessa gasped. She pumped the brakes frantically. Thud, thud, zero resistance. The curve was rushing up at her at 70 miles. Per H, our panic seized her chest. She slammed her hand against the buckle of her seatbelt, trying to free herself so she could brace for impact. The red button wouldn't depress. It was jammed solid. She was trapped. Through the pouring rain, the reflective arrows of the guardrail illuminated in her headlights, growing larger and larger and larger. Vanessa opened her mouth and screamed. The morning news broadcast echoed through the high ceilings of my penthouse. A horrific crash late last night on the Palisades Interstate Parkway. A black SUV lost control on a sharp curve, slamming violently into the reinforced concrete barrier. Authorities report that the driver, 24-year-old Vanessa Adams, survived the impact, but remains in critical condition. Sources at the hospital confirm she has lost her pregnancy and suffered severe spinal trauma. I muted the television, staring at the aerial footage of the crushed black metal. She didn't go over the cliff. She lived, but she would spend the rest of her life trapped in a broken body, relying on the underfunded state medical system she had once mocked. Poetic justice had a twisted sense of humor. In a shocking development, The anchor's voice continued as I read the closed captions. NYPD detectives arrested former tech CEO Cole Vance early this morning. Based on an anonymous tip, investigators discovered the SUV's brake lines had been deliberately severed. Vance is being held without bail on charges of attempted murder in the first degree. I set the remote down. The heavy knot that had resided in my chest since the moment I woke up at that altar finally completely dissolved. The game was over. I had won. The interrogation room at the NYPD precinct smelled of stale coffee and industrial bleach. Cole sat handcuffed to the metal table. He was wearing a faded orange jumpsuit, his hair matted, his jaw bruised purple from Gabriel's punch. The arrogant, untouchable billionaire who had watched me burn in my past life was gone. In his place was a hollowed-out, shivering rat. The heavy metal door clicked open. Cole's head snapped up when he saw me step into the room. A desperate, pathetic light ignited in his bloodshot eyes. "Serena!" He lunged forward, the handcuffs rattling violently against the table. "You came. I knew you would come. You have to tell them. Serena, tell them I was framed. I didn't touch her car." I stood near the door, my arms crossed, watching him with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing an insect. "Save your breath, Cole," I said, my voice perfectly flat. "The security cameras in the alleyway behind your apartment caught you crawling under the chassis with wire cutters. The police found the cutters in your kitchen trash can. You always were incredibly sloppy." Cole's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. The color drained from his face as the reality of his situation crashed down on him. I did it for us," he whispered, his voice cracking, tears spilling down his cheeks. "She was a parasite, Serena. She ruined everything. I realized she wasn't the girl on the boat. You were. You saved me. I just wanted to clear the path so we could be together again." "You didn't want to clear a path," I corrected him coldly. "You wanted to erase your mistake because you were broke. You used the exact same coward's method you always use. You trap women in cars and let the metal do the dirty work." Cole frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. What are you talking about? I never." "It doesn't matter," I cut him off. He would never understand the reference to a life he had stolen from me. "I just came to deliver a message. Vanessa woke up from her surgery this morning. She's paralyzed from the waist down. And the moment the detectives told her you tampered with the brakes, she gave them everything. Your offshore accounts, your corporate fraud, everything. You aren't just going to prison for attempted murder, Cole. The SEC is going to bury you for federal fraud." Cole began to hyperventilate. His chest heaved, and a low animalistic whine escaped his throat. "Serena, please, I'm begging you. Get your father's lawyers. You loved me. You loved me for 8 years." I walked up to the table, leaning in close, so he could see the absolute zero in my eyes. "The girl who loved you died in a burning car," I whispered. "Enjoy your cage, Cole." I turned my back on his sobbing and walked out of the room. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, cutting off his wails forever. 6 months later, the view from the CEO's office at Sterling Enterprises offered a panoramic sweep of the Manhattan skyline. I sat behind the massive mahogany desk, signing the final authorization for the acquisition of Vance Technologies' remaining patents. Me father had officially stepped down to chairman of the board, handing the reins of the empire entirely to me. The board, who had once viewed me as a fragile heiress, now treated me with a fearful, quiet reverence. The double doors to my office swung open without a knock. Only one person in the building had that privilege. Gabriel Vance walked in. He wore a charcoal bespoke suit that fit him flawlessly. The dark, predatory energy that always surrounded him softened the moment his eyes met mine. Over the past 6 months, he had been my fiercest ally in the boardroom, and my only sanctuary outside of it. "You are working late, Madam CEO," Gabriel said, his voice a low, smooth rumble. He walked over to my desk and dropped a thick, leather-bound folder right on top of my patent documents. I leaned back in my chair, raising an eyebrow. "What is this, Gabriel? Another tech startup you want me to gut?" "Better," he smiled, his eyes gleaming. "Open it." I opened the folder. Inside was a deed and a master development contract for the Hudson Yards South expansion, a multi-billion-dollar commercial real estate project that every major developer in the city had been fighting over for years. I looked up at him, genuinely stunned. "Gabriel, the Vanguard Group owned this land. How did you get the exclusive development rights?" "I bought them out," Gabriel said casually, resting his hands on the edge of my desk, leaning in. "And I'm transferring the land usage rights to Sterling Enterprises, permanently, free of charge." My breath hitched. In the business world, a gift of this magnitude was unheard of. It was a king, making move. "This is $1 billion asset," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "This is too much, Gabriel. I can't just accept this as a gift." "It is not a gift, Serena," Gabriel murmured. He walked around the desk, stopping right beside my chair. "It comes with a condition." I looked up into his dark, intense eyes. "And what is the condition?" Gabriel didn't hesitate. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small, sleek black velvet box, and set it on top of the $1 billion contract. "A merger," Gabriel said softly, his gaze dropping to my lips before locking onto my eyes with absolute sincerity. "Not just between Sterling and Vance, between you and me. You said you wanted an empire. Serena, I want to build it with you. I want to stand beside you, protect your blind spots, and cook your steaks exactly how you like them." He slowly went down on one knee, opening the box. Inside was a breathtaking emerald, cut diamond, elegant, sharp, and utterly flawless. "Marry me, Serena," he said, his voice thick with raw emotion. "Let me be the man you actually deserve." I looked at the ring, then at the contract, and finally at the man kneeling before me. In my past life, I had begged for scraps of affection from a man who despised me. I had shrunk myself to fit into a mold of a perfect, submissive wife, only to be discarded like trash. But now, sitting in the highest tower in the city, holding the keys to an empire, I was looking at a man who didn't want to conquer me. He wanted to crown me. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. I reached out, resting my hand gently against Gabriel's cheek. "I accept your terms, Mr. Vance," I whispered. Gabriel's eyes lit up. He took the ring from the box and slid it onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. He stood up, pulling me out of my chair and into his arms. As his lips met mine in a deep, consuming kiss, I looked out the floor, to ceiling windows at the glittering city below. The past was ashes. The future was mine. Let's get real for a second, ladies. If you strip away the reincarnation trope, this is a story about the agonizing cost of making yourself small to fit into a mediocre man's life. In her first life, Serena was the classic ride or die. She funded his dreams, cooked his meals, and literally dragged him from a burning boat. And her reward, being locked in a burning car while he played the grieving victim. Men like Cole suffer from a lethal cocktail of bruised ego and entitlement. They resent the women who build them up because it reminds them they couldn't do it alone. So, they find Vanessa, a blank slate who looks at them like they're God, entirely unaware that God's Wi-Fi is secretly being paid for by the wife. But What I absolutely adore about Serena's rebirth is that she didn't try to fix the timeline by being a better, more vigilant partner. She didn't try to win him back. She detached. She handed him his mistress, pulled her funding, and watched his entire house of cards collapse in the wind. That is the ultimate flex. You don't need to destroy a man who built his empire on your back. You just need to stand up. Gravity will do the rest. And let's talk about Gabriel. Yes, we love a bespoke suit, wearing steak. Cooking king who hands over billion-dollar real estate like it is a bouquet of peonies. But Gabriel wasn't her savior. He was her equal. He didn't want a maid. He wanted a CEO. So, darlings, I have to ask if you could hit rewind and go back to the exact moment you found out your ex was a walking red flag. What would you do? Would you call him out in public? Or would you quietly drain the joint accounts, pack your bags, and let him marry the problem? Spill the tea in the comments below. You know, I'll be sipping my wine and reading every single one. If this story gave you life, hit subscribe, smash that like button, and send this to a bestie who needs to remember her crown is heavy, but her block button is light. Stay sharp, know your worth, and never, ever fund a man's audacity. Bye, darlings.